everybody. This is Miff, life and performance coach for ambitious individuals looking to spark and initiate their next evolution using my aligned results framework. And this is the Actually You Can podcast. If you're here, you're probably an ambitious individual looking to achieve big things and live a thriving, fulfilled life. If so, you've come to the right place. I believe that in order to reach your goals, you must first do the inner work to gain a better understanding of yourself, your habits, and how you view yourself and the world. You then need to develop sustainable behavior patterns that will best support you in reaching your goals. And this is exactly what this podcast is here to support you with. Be sure to hit subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to so you can easily find this podcast again and tune into future episodes. We release episodes every week. Today we're talking about healing with Teri Wellbrock, who is a survivor of childhood trauma and the host of the Healing Place podcast. She is also an author, speaker, and advocate for trauma recovery. We discuss the power of healing and how it can transform your life. So, get inspired to start your own healing process and create a life filled with joy and peace. Because actually, you can. Hi, Teri. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. My heart is smiling, my face is smiling. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
And so today we're going to be talking about the subject of healing. And so I'd love for you to share with the audience before we dig into that. What do you do and what has your journey been with healing?
Oh gosh. Well, my story is that I had a horrific first 22 years of my life with a tremendous amount of trauma, which I can certainly touch upon and talk about that. But I found myself stepping onto the healing path in 2013. Gosh, I can't believe it's been 10 years. And I started my own healing journey utilizing EMDR therapy, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, a lot of words. And that really, really, really helped me understand that I wasn't broken forever. I thought I had suffered these horrific traumas and I was forever going to be experiencing panic attacks and anxiety and all of the overwhelm that was happening in my life. And EMDR gave me hope. And I was able to start going back into those traumas and processing them. A lot of them happened in my childhood. And as a child, I could not process them. And at the time, coincidentally, my undergrad is in psychology. And so I was working for a mental health agency where I was living and working in the school systems and working with kiddos who were maybe experiencing bullying or having addictions in their house, in their home. So alcoholism or drug addiction by the parents or caretakers. Um, just whatever sort of anxiety or issues they may have been having. And so I was brought in to work with these kiddos, and we were doing things like kids yoga on YouTube and art therapy and learning to draw out our feelings. And what I found was, as I was working with these kids, I was starting to build my own coping skills toolbox, and I was starting to utilize, oh, this writing about it, this journaling is really helpful. Oh, this art is helping me express things that I maybe couldn't really find words for. Oh, this yoga is really helping me feel more grounded. This mindfulness stuff. And so I then, interesting, was working. One of my friends was a therapist at the agency, and she said, "Teri, we totally should start a podcast." Now she was in her 20s, and I was in my late 40s, and I was like, "Awesome! What's a podcast?" Like I had no idea. I'd never heard of one. Didn't listen to them, and so we started this fun little podcast. And at first, we were talking about angels and aliens and just fun, funky stuff. And then she was offered a position in a hospital as a therapist for a full-time position, as well as having her private practice. And it just became too much for her after about 10 episodes. So I said, I think I want to continue this, but take it in a more not so much serious, but a more focused direction on healing. And so I started to reach out to names in the trauma recovery arena and people who authors and speakers and researchers. And I started to receive responses back saying, yeah, I'd love to join you on the show before the days of Podmatch. And yeah, so they started to come on. And again, I was just absorbing as a survivor myself everything that they were out there doing in the world. But suddenly I was becoming a voice in this show. My show started to grow and blossom because there's just such a need in this world of ours, for those who have been through traumatic events or ACEs, which are adverse childhood experiences. And having a super high ACEs score myself, I could speak to a lot of it, um, from a survivor and a thriver point of view. So then I just blossomed from there. I'm still writing my memoir. It's been a long time in the writing, but I do a monthly Hope for Healing newsletter. I created some online courses that are being revamped currently. I started speaking publicly. I was speaking at trauma recovery events and talking to folks and helping people understand. My most recent endeavor, I'm so excited, is I'm narrating audiobooks, for books on Amazon, on Audible, and they're all healing related. And so the first one is out there in the world. Number 2 is currently in review. Just submitted book 3, and I'm now recording today book 4. So I love the idea of taking my pain and turning it into purpose. And that is a very long answer to your question. That's
It's such a beautiful story, and it's really beautiful to hear that, to your point, you've turned your pain into a purpose. And so, if you don't mind sharing, I'd be interested in looking more to that. I think people either use their pain to hold them back, or they use it, to your point, as an opportunity to really thrive. And so, I'd be interested to hear, what did your journey look like before these events? Did you have particular career aspirations that were influenced by these events, or were you always inclined to help people?
yes, great question. So I actually graduated with my degree. I went back to school to get a degree in psychology when my oldest two, were little kids, and it was because I was so fascinated with the fact that my mom had been through similar traumas to me, particularly 2 bank robberies. We were both involved separately in 2 bank robberies. And to me, I was like, how is she not having panic attacks? How is she not having this overwhelming anxiety? Now, in hindsight, I understand with her alcohol addiction, she was utilizing alcohol as a crutch, I guess you will. I couldn't think of the word I wanted to use, so we'll just go with crutch. Um, she was self-medicating. That's it. She was self-medicating with it. Whereas I was desperately just clawing my way through trying to figure out how to just live day to day without having a panic attack. And so I did go back to school, um, to really understand the human brain and how it functioned. I got that degree in the 90s, and so we still didn't understand like we do now the impact of trauma, particularly those adverse childhood experiences and the impact of that early trauma that children experience, how that has such a profound impact on our adult lives, especially if you have a ACE score of 4 or higher. And just to help your audience understand those ACEs, ACEs, sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect, addiction in the household, an incarcerated parent. So those are just 5 of the 10, that we look at to determine, what someone's ACE score is. And there's also the resilience score. Did you have someone that in your household that was supporting you? Did you feel you had a voice? Did you have somebody there? And I certainly did. My grandma Kitty was just an incredibly beautiful soul that didn't hit me, that did just love me, that did honor me and my voice and my needs. And so I came out of that trauma with this incredible resilience. And so that's how I was able to survive it and then get to that point where I was like, all right, it's time to start healing.
And you mentioned that you went back to school to get your psychology degree because you're interested in learning more about the human brain. And it sounds like that was very, for lack of a better term, therapeutic for you. Were you looking at any other modalities at the time, or was your first reaction to go, I need to learn more about why this is happening?
Yes, I just dove right into psychology to try to figure out again. And what's fascinating to me, I remember the moment in time because my goal was to go continue on past my bachelor's degree and go obtain my PhD to become a child psychologist. And I was sitting in a child abuse class, and it was one of those auditorium classes, and I was near the back, and they had this giant screen, and they were talking about a book that we were going to read called A Child Called It. And they were images were being flashed up on the screen of abused children, and I just froze. And the tears were in my eyes. I didn't understand at the time that I was being triggered and I was flashing back and having, these flashbacks to my own childhood. And I wasn't correlating again at the time. I just didn't understand what an impact my trauma had had on my life. A funny story when I started back to therapy in 2013, when I took that first step back onto the healing path, showed up with this list of 5 things for this therapist that I was sitting down in front of. And I was like, okay, so I'm going through a divorce and my mom's an alcoholic and I'm, still trying that codependent relationship. And so I had all these things. And number 5 was, oh, and I had all this horrible trauma as a child, like as a little PS, not realizing that all of that number 5 was the thing that was like bubbling up through the rest of number 4. And so just again, once I started to understand that impact, but then on the reverse side, once I started researching and doing this work, brain plasticity, wow, the brain, how we can now rewire it and we can change. And I don't have panic attacks anymore. I mean, I've done incredible healing work with a lot of modalities um, because I now understand that our brain, yes, it can be injured by trauma, but we have the power to certainly um, rewire ourselves and really make our lives filled with joy and tranquility.
And on that note, you mentioned, the trauma or events that happen in childhood can impact us in our day to day. We just might not acknowledge it. As you mentioned, the things that happened to you as a child were number 5 on your list. You're like, oh, yeah, little PS thing that happened so long ago that can't possibly be impacting me now. And I see that a lot with people too. I would love to hear from you in your experience and from what you've learned. How does our childhood impact our present day experience?
Oh, absolutely. So, two of the things I myself have a diagnosis of CPTSD, which is complex post traumatic stress disorder, and so trauma can happen. Um, as an acute trauma. So, me going through a date rape or me going through a bank robbery where a gun is held to my head and then a coworker is shot and murdered. That's acute. It's a one-time situation that occurred in my life. But then I was also experiencing in my childhood and through those early years chronic trauma. And what that was is, which mom is going to walk through the door tonight? Is it going to be sober mom that's going to pull out her guitar and sing songs with us? Or is it going to be drunk mom who's been out drinking after work with her friends and going to scream for my dad to silence the children and he's going to grab the belt and beat us? So, and so living in constant state of hyper arousal, of all never knowing what was going to happen next. Like I just didn't feel safe. And so I was always, always just on edge. And so the impact that it had on me as an adult is that it weakened my immune system. It weakened my lymph system. So things physically, those with high ACE scores can have the the numbers jump dramatically, like by the hundreds of percentages for cancer, for heart disease, for diabetes, because again, it has a physical profound impact on us, but then you think about the spiritual part of it. I certainly had some church abuse. You know, my choir director sexually abused me when as a 10-year-old repeatedly, um, and so trying to keep. I was raised Catholic, and so keep my Catholic faith and my faith and God as a part of my life while also experiencing this abuse at the hands of someone that was a part of my faith. Um, so that has a spiritual toll. It can have a spiritual toll on us. Obviously mentally and psychologically, how trust issues, feelings of abandonment, the fears that would arise. And so, yeah, these things that even some things that may seem very benign, um, that can have a very profound effect on us as we grow into adulthood. I really quick to give an example. There's a book on EMDR written by Dr. Shapiro, who is the founder of EMDR. And in the book, she was talking about this man who had been given a promotion at work. And for this promotion, and he had wanted this promotion so bad. And when he got it, they said, "Oh, well, you're going to have to give these presentations in front of people." And he froze and he said, "I I can't get up and speak in front of people. I," and he just went into complete panic about it. And so he ended up seeing an EMDR therapist, and they went back into his childhood, and suddenly he was back at like 3 years old, walking with his grandpa down a country road, and he was just yammering on to his grandpa about something, that 3-year-olds yammer on about, just talking, 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 talking. And a farmer was walking down the road and ran into them and started talking to grandpa. And meanwhile, the 3-year-old's just talking away. And he says to grandpa, "Well, if I had a youngin' that was talking like that all the time, I'd throw him into the creek like a bag full of kittens." And so he stored that away. Like the old farmer guy was probably just joking, not a funny joke, but joking. And so when it came time to him, then all of a sudden, "Oh, you have to speak in front of people." He had this unknown memory that was there stored inside of him that he had never processed correctly, and so that he could move on from it. And so once he was recognized that as an adult and was like, "Oh, well, of course that impacted me as a child on a very deep level." He did some processing work on it. And then he was able to release it, and I call it releasing that stored negative energy. And then he was able to go into this new role and speak and do it without issue.
And so, hearing that, what makes a memory, for what reasons is a particular memory stored like that? So, for example, what I'm thinking is I would love if I remembered consistently where I put my keys or my phone, but I don't. So, how does our brain choose to remember what to store, and then subsequently we continue to experience later on, and what it doesn't?
Right. Well, and again, that's another really great question. I probably can't speak to it on a super scientific level, but I will speak to it on a level of when I would have all of a sudden my left shoulder. Oh my gosh, I could just feel like just I could just feel someone squeezing on it. And my neck would hurt, my shoulder would hurt. And so the therapist would say, "What's happening? What's going on? What are you feeling?" Rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. And so as we continued to process it, all of a sudden it was like, "Oh, my dad is here. It's my dad." And that was so my body actually had held on to the memory. So you'll have body memories that come up. Um, and now they're starting to understand that digestive issues, headaches, migraines, so many times doctors will come back and say, we don't know what's wrong. Like we've run all these tests and nothing's there. We don't understand why you're experiencing this. Well, that's because odds are it's unprocessed trauma that the body, the brain has somehow held on to, hasn't been processed, and it's trying really to get our attention. It's waving its arms and saying, "Hey, over here, you need to take care of this. Like we're trying to get your attention on this, and it's time to process it." And so, I guess in answer to your question, I would say that those things that in the moment we just cannot, for whatever reason, whether we're a child, whether we just aren't in the right mindset, something traumatic happens, in whether it's a, a small t, is a small trauma, something huge. Um, we hold on to it, we store it away, and then when the time is right, and when our body says or our brain says, "Okay, we can't hold on to this any longer," it's going to make itself known, and then it's time for us to pay attention. I mean, truly, I I now look at things that come up, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, hold up, let's take a step back from this and ask, all right, what lesson am I needing to learn in this? What's going on here?" That I need to be paying attention, and just honoring my needs, really. I mean, that's being gentle with myself and honoring. That's what I can just really recommend to folks is, um, yeah, just paying attention and listening.
And I feel very similar. I believe that we do store past traumas in the body and that can manifest in the physical body as well. What would you say to someone whose first reaction is, I have a little bit of a sore left shoulder. I'm just going to pop some painkillers and I'll be fine. How would you, I guess, educate someone who is in that mindset that they're probably, yeah, not willing to look into their past experiences?
Right. Well, and again, I'm a huge proponent of natural healing and utilizing um, just an incredible array of modalities that can help us move through it, because by popping the pain pill, we're trying to move around it. And truly, I can tell you most assuredly that the only way through it, or the only way to get from the darkness into the light, is through it. We can try to get around it, but we really do have to go through it. And so, um, yeah, it's there again. It's there to get our attention and say, "Hey, um, the pill, the painkiller is going to mask the symptom, but guess what? Whatever's causing it is still there. When that pain pill wears off, guess what? You're still like, ow, it's still hurting." And so by doing the healing work, by being loving and kind with yourself and saying, what is it that you really need? Instead of, I'm going to try to shut you up and make you go away, just honoring yourself. It's such a gift to yourself. It really is.
And so using a technique like EMDR, what sort of results have you had by clients? Like what, for lack of a better term, miracles have you seen occur by people going through that style of treatment?
Yes. Now, I myself am not a licensed practitioner. Like I said, my degree is in psychology, but I don't practice as a practitioner. Um, and so, what I do with people is help them build their coping skills toolbox by utilizing what I call complementary, and I got that from another podcast guest of mine, is complementary strategies. And so mindfulness practice, oh my gosh, I love it. I utilize it every day. Gratitude practice, positive affirmations, meditation, um, prayer. Gosh, I'm trying to think. Like, there's just so many. It's Ho'oponopono Hawaiian healing. Like, that is one of my favorite go-tos, because that's a
What's
prayer
that?
of forgiveness. It's very
Mm.
4 very easy steps, and it's incredibly powerful for bringing healing to yourself, and healing to others. So, yeah.
That's so wonderful. And just hearing you say that there are so many different practices that you can do on your healing journey. And so I think often people might try one and go, this isn't really for me. I'm going to go back to the pain pills or my GP to get the next diagnosis or anything like that. What would you say to someone who hasn't quite found their modality yet?
I'd say keep building that toolbox because, again, the beauty of building a ginormous coping skills toolbox and trying all these different modalities, if you come at it with the approach like of curiosity and um, joy in saying, oh, let me try this. And then you can say, oh, it didn't work for me. That doesn't mean it's not always going to. Like it may just not work in the moment, but you've learned it. And you can say at some point, hey, maybe I'll try that again. And it just may work that time. For me, and the example that I have is breath work. So, how many times I had people say, "Oh, let's do breath work. Focus on your breathing, 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 breathing." And I know for me and my state when I first was doing my healing work, I didn't want to be in my body. My body was a
Mhm.
scary, scary place to be. And so breath work made me pay attention to the fact that I was trying to get air into my lungs, holding it, then slowly letting the air out, holding it and repeating it. And that made me incredibly anxious, which was the opposite effect of what breath work is supposed to do. Now I do breath work and I love it because I again continued saying, all right, well, that wasn't working. Let me try the next. Okay, well, let's try this. Let's try this. Let's try this. But again, because I learned it, now when I do my meditations or I'm doing some mindfulness work, absolutely bringing breath work in because I've done that healing work. And so then now I like being in my body. I'm okay with it. It's not such a scary place anymore.
100%. And you mentioned, you know, going back and trying modalities, even if they haven't worked the first time, because it's also a case of right time, right place for some modalities, I feel. And I'm interested to hear, I mean, it's not like we go through one therapy session and all of a sudden we're healed. How long would you say your healing journey has taken? And would you say you're completely healed? Or what does fully healed look like for you?
Yes. When I first started, it was 98 sessions over 4 years, and so it was an incredibly long process, and I don't tell people that to scare them to think, "I don't wanna have to go to therapy for 4 years." My trauma was incredibly complex. It was very, very complex, and so I tell folks this all the time. We are all on our own healing journeys. And so it's not a trauma race. It's not a comparison of, oh, that person had it so much worse or, oh, mine just insignificant. No, pain is pain. Heartache is heartache. Trauma is trauma. And so you are so very worthy of the healing. Um, and whatever your journey looks like for you.
And what would you say to someone who goes, I'm not sure if I have 4 years. If they have a complex trauma, they go, I'm not sure if I have that time." What would you say to them?
Yes. Well, I would absolutely encourage everyone to at least talk to someone. It doesn't have to be EMDR. EMDR for me worked but it is going back into traumas. There are modalities out there such as EFT or uh, so tapping. Um Emotional freedom technique. A lot of somatic work, which I've been utilizing, which is incredibly powerful, where you don't have to know the particular trauma. Perhaps you don't want to remember the trauma that may have happened when you were 1 or 2 or 3 years old that you have no memory of. It's not a matter of having to go back into a traumatic event, but you can still tap on or do somatic work on those things, what's surfacing right now in the present moment, like what's coming up, My mom died this year, on my birthday, March 14th, and I was having to fly back and forth between my home, to be with her in her hospice journey. Um, and I was terrified of the idea of getting on a plane and flying by myself and not having a family member there to hold their hand but I knew I had to go be with my mom. And so again, when I sat down on that plane for the first time and I had my calming crystal in my hand and, my headphones on with some meditation music and doing some breathing work and getting myself very calm. Well, my right arm was tingling like crazy. And I was like, okay, why my right arm? Like, where is that coming from? So I decided I gently laid my hand on that arm and I said, okay, I know you're scared. Oh, it's okay. Thank you for letting me know. Thank you. I appreciate you, letting me know that you're not feeling comfortable with this. Tell me what you need. What do you need right now? It was just all of a sudden, like, I don't want to say a voice, but I just had this sensation that, I just needed to move. I just needed to kind of just shake it out. And so I did a little bit of shaking work. I turned to the lady next to me and I was like, oh, I hope we have a nice flight. And so we had started having a conversation. Next thing you know, we're in the air. And the whole time I kept my hand on my arm and just honored it and just listened and paid attention.
That's such an incredibly powerful relationship you have with your body. And it's really interesting hearing you talk, and it sounds like you have every reason in the world to be angry at people, to be angry at the world, to be frustrated, yet you've made it almost your mission to be able to give back and to contribute to the greater healing of this world. Why did you choose to take that path versus the former and just decide to be bitter and angry at the world?
Oh, that's such a good question, and I love it so much. I just I call this my soul work. It's just such a calling for me to because I was able to make it out of that horrific darkness. And it was a scary, scary place to live and be, and make it into this light and just live a life, even when things happen. I mean, I got horribly, horribly sick with mycotoxin poisoning from mold exposure, and battled it for the last 2 years. But I took it as an opportunity to say, what am I learning now? How can I take this experience and what I've learned, practice what I preach, and then help others again on their healing journey. To me, it really wasn't a choice. Like I just felt this is what brings me joy, and makes my heart happy, my soul smile, because I know that healing is possible. And one of the things you had asked earlier was, what does healing look like? And to me, it's a destination, or it's a journey, not a destination, meaning that I'll always be healing. There's Life happens. There's always something that's going to come up. My mom getting sick and dying on my birthday. Um, Whatever. It's just something will most likely come along in my life over the next however many years I have here. Um, and I will use that as a continued healing practice. And so, yeah, to me, healing, I don't want to try to say, oh, you'll never be healed. I'm just saying that if you look at it as, oh, it's a continuous journey, you can be joyous and living a peace filled life, yet still be healing.
Yeah, 100%. And to your point, life is still happening as long as you're alive, you're living life and things are happening day to day. It'd be a very boring, unfulfilling life if nothing happened to you, right? So I think
Right.
a lot of people go into that journey going, I'm going to be healed, and they get disappointed when more stuff pops up. They get triggered. And to your point, I also see it as an opportunity to continue to strengthen your, for lack of a better term, coping mechanisms. So it's every time you're presented with a new situation, it's like, great, I'm going to really dig deeper into my journaling at the moment. That's what I need. Or to your point, what does my body need right now? I'm going to strengthen that skill. So rather looking at it if something's happening to me, it's like, okay, what lesson am I learning? And I'm interested to hear as well. I mean, terrible things happen to really good people and terrible things happen to maybe not so great people. But what would you, I mean, and this is my complete ignorance on being able to speak really respectfully to people who have experienced big T traumas. And I'm interested to hear when people say, I think in the self development space, a quote I often hear is we're responsible for not necessarily what happens to us, but how we respond. How does that come across in the healing space with traumas? People don't deserve the shitty things that happen to them, but I think it's really easy for us to fall into a place of, yes, this has happened to me. I've deserved it. It's happened to me for a reason. And especially when it's something really horrible that's happened, I think it's a really um don't know how to say it. It's a really not a great place to be when you're taking the blame and the shoulder for something that really you didn't deserve at all, but it's happened to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've certainly tried to look at it from both perspectives because I understand needing to take personal responsibility for our healing journeys. We do. It is our responsibility. Is it our fault that something has happened to us? Absolutely not.
Great.
However, is it our responsibility to heal ourselves?
Mhm.
100%. And that, I think, is then moving from a victim mentality to a victor mentality, and being able to just move from being a survivor to being a thriver. And I mean, that's the difference. If you're going to sit in that mindset of, yeah, what you said, this really shitty thing happened to me, I can just be angry at my mom for being that alcoholic, or I can confront my mom in a loving and compassionate way and say, Mom, maybe it's time you look at your childhood trauma and why you use alcohol to self medicate. And then watching her have the courage, and I'm getting a little teary eyed, to step onto her healing path in her early 80s and give up drinking for 2.5 years. And yeah, in the end, she fell back into the bottle. But to witness this 80 something year old do her own healing work, that's why hashtag never too late, because, um, yeah, in her willingness to then grow our relationship and do that healing work, that to me, that's a gift to the world. It just
Mhm.
helps bring peace to not just me and her, but, you know, everyone who witnessed it. And, it yeah, it's a gift to yourself to be able to move out of that victim mindset into that thriving mindset.
Yeah. And the world, not only you, but the world is better off if you commit to your healing journey. And it's
Yes.
so wonderful to hear that you inspired a healing journey within your 80-year-old mother. That's incredible.
Yeah, I
That's,
tell you
yeah.
what, I'll never forget standing at the foot of her hospital bed, and she was in another detox from a 5-day drinking binge, and I just tears streaming down my face, and I said, "Mom, it's time. Like, you have to start dealing with whatever it is you're trying to suppress and drown with that vodka." And, she opened up and set it free through tears, which she didn't do, and the horrors that she lived through as a child. And I just remember thinking, holy moly, here she's lived 80 something years having never talked about this and
Yeah.
trying to just again drown it with as much vodka as she could pour in. And it was taking a terrible toll, not just on her life, but on all of ours that loved her.
Yeah. And again, that's such a beautiful gift you've given your mother. And I would love to talk about the other gifts you've given the world. You've written a book, you've done some incredible work with your therapy dog. I'd love for you to speak to those too.
Oh, thanks. Well, yeah, we wrote a little book called The Doodle with the Noodle. about
Such
so
a
our
great name.
dog is a Labradoodle. And, so I wrote it when my daughter was in 4th grade at the time, and, I was doing therapy dog work with our Labradoodle, Sammy, who's the sweetest baby in the world. Um, and so we drew the pictures ourselves and we wrote it. It was written with preschoolers in mind, so you can tell we drew it. It looks like I have 0 artistic drawing ability, so but it was fun. It was fun to teach my daughter how to put her story out there and put Sammy's story out there and publish it and go through that whole process. And then we would travel um, to schools and we would read the book and we would bring Sammy with us and Sammy would do her therapy dog work with the kiddos. And then I started traveling to schools with Sammy and other organizations, like Girl Scout troops and libraries. We would do readings at libraries just to allow Sammy truly that opportunity to work with, especially kids who were being bullied or experiencing some sort of anxiety. And just, she taught me a lot, meaning Sammy, because how she could turn these tears streaming down a little boy's face, as he showed up at school. Parents dropped him off because his sister had attempted suicide and they were at the hospital with his sister. And here's this little 4th grader trying to figure out how to get through his day. And then this big black furry Labradoodle comes and pounces on his lap and plops on him in a beanbag chair and just loves him without words, just loves this kid. And he walked out of there beaming with a smile and saying, "Can I come see Sammy again next week?" And so she shifted everything just by being there, just by being love. And that to me, like that's the lesson, right? Like if someone's hurting, if someone's struggling, just be love. Just be there with them. We don't need to be Sammy the Labradoodle. Just plop down next to them and just love.
That's so incredible. And so when you work with the therapy dogs, you witness such beautiful reactions and within these kids. Did Sammy do anything in particular? Or literally to your point, did Sammy just loved the kid?
Oh, I have so many Sammy stories that would blow your mind. We had one, we were, my daughter was actually with me at the time. She was off school. And so I said, "Hey, do you want to come? We're going to meet with some 7th and 8th graders at a school." And so we had about 70 kids crammed into this classroom. And we were standing at the front of the classroom. Some of the kids were in desks and tables, and some were sitting on the floor. And Sammy, was just a great therapy dog, always followed my commands, always had her eyes on me. And for whatever reason, she was pulling me like to the left. She kept wanting to go to the left, to the left. And I was like, what is going on? And I saw this child sitting on the floor near the front. And I looked at her and I said, "Apparently Sammy wants to sit with you. Would that be okay?" And she just very quietly shook her head yes. So we walked over and I kept Sammy on lead, of course. And I continued my presentation. And Sammy just plopped again down on this girl, putting her paws over this girl. And this girl was just petting her, loving on her. And presentation ended. And afterwards, all the kids had cleared out. And 2 of the teachers came up to me and they said, "That was incredible to witness. How did that dog know?" And I said, "Why? What was going on?" And they said, "That little girl that she wanted to be with, that she was pulling towards, her mom and I wanna say an aunt both died that week. And this girl was having incredible grief and struggling with grief horribly. And somehow this dog, this beautiful creature, knew that this kid just needed to be loved, just needed some fluffy love on her lap. And it was again a beautiful, beautiful thing to witness. More really quick story. Um, a retired teacher in a school we were in had passed away. And so they had a bunch of substitute teachers come in for about 2 hours so that the staff and teachers could all go to the funeral. And so we happened to be in the building and they called us down to the principal's office, to the office. And Sammy and I walked in and I saw her work the room. It was incredible because there was one lady standing alone in a corner, and all Sammy did was walk over and just laid her head on this lady's thigh. She just gently laid her head, right? And this lady didn't make eye contact with me, didn't look at Sammy, but just put her hand down and placed it on Sammy's head. It was just gently touching her head. Sammy didn't move. She just stood there. Then we moved on, and there was a group of 3 women, and they were talking and laughing and kind of, just giggling and catching up with each other. And Sammy went bounding over to them, tail wagging, ready to go, like, "Hi, guys, what's going on?" So she was picking up on the energy of these people, and she was understanding what each of them needed. And again, if we can just, as humans, be a little more Sammy and pay attention, what does this person need? Like, is it a big old hug or just some silence and a hand to hold? So there you go.
I've always been a dog person. I'm going to hug my little dogs extra tight tonight. That's such a beautiful story. Thank you so much for sharing Sammy with us.
Well, thank you
I
for
know
being me.
you shared such beautiful insights and tools to help people to start on their own healing journeys. And so I'd love to hear from you. What's a really actionable step someone can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start their healing journey if it's something they've been considering?
Yes,
Mhm.
I would say, and I just have to say real quick, Sammy keeps hearing me say her name, and so she's over here laying next to me, and I don't know if you can hear, but her tail's like thump, 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 thump. And
Hi, Sammy.
s- like, what are you talking about? Why are you saying my name so much? Um, so yeah, an actionable step, I would say my one of my favorite things to do is mindfulness practice. And so I love 5 4 3 2 1 mindfulness. And what that is, nature is incredibly healing. I live on a beautiful little island in South Carolina in the United States. And I will go for a nature walk or just be out among the trees or on a beach and find 5 things that you can look at and describe it to yourself in as much detail as possible. And so not just, "Oh, the leaves are green." It's, "Oh, that leaf is a green that reminds me of St. Patrick's Day." I mean, that's the United States thing, but, and it's like, "Oh, drinking a green beer with, some friends." And so it just what you're doing is bringing yourself right here into the now, into this moment, particularly with nature. You can be very present in what you are experiencing, particularly the beauty of this moment. And so the 5 things you can look at in great detail, 4 things that you can hear. And so stretch your hearing as far as it can go. Oh, I hear a bird or a dog barking. Wait, can I hear one just a little further away and try to stretch it and be with it and just again being in the moment. 3 things um, I wanna say you can touch. So what does that leaf feel like? Touch it. Is it bumpy? Is it smooth? Is it and again, describe it in great detail to yourself. 2 things to smell, 1 thing to taste. Is it the orange you just ate or the toothpaste from this morning still lingering? Um, yeah, and so it's using our senses to be right here, right now, in this beautiful moment.
That's incredible, and just hearing you go through that checklist, I'm doing that in my office right now, and holy cow, everything seems a little lighter and brighter. It's very
Oh,
powerful, so I definitely encourage everyone to think about that. And thank you again so much, Terry, for your time today. If someone's interested in learning more about the work that you do, or perhaps even getting a copy of your book, where can they do that?
yes. Oh, thank you so much. The best place to go is teriwellbrock.com. So it's TERI, just one R, WELL, the letter B, and then ROCK. And that has my podcast, the Healing Place podcast, links on there. It has, yes, it has links to my books. And I just started doing narrations for
Yeah.
books on Audible. And so I have yet to add all of those books to the website. I'm going to do that this week. So But if you go onto Audible, you can type in my name and yeah, you'll find me. Just starting book 4. So, and they're all healing related. So they're all related to healing and it's beautiful. Um, what else is on there? I have some Sammy stuff on there and I want to say links to, again, my courses and how to connect with me if you want to do some work with me. So,
How wonderful. I'm up for a new book, so I know what I'll be looking at this afternoon. Thank you for sharing that. And
oh,
thank you again for
absolutely.
your time today, Terry. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh my gosh, my heart is smiling. It's just been wonderful to be here. Thank you for giving me a space to share my story.
Thank you for joining me today for another episode of the Actually You Can podcast. I so enjoy having you here, and I hope you've taken away powerful insights and tools that will support you to achieve your high-level results. Now, before you go apply all of this wisdom in your life, I would be so grateful if you are able to leave us a podcast review on the platform that you're listening to, or share this episode with a friend. Your support means that we can help more self-led, high-performing individuals just like you expand what's possible for them. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on today's episode, so please go on and shoot me a note on socials and let me know what you think. You can find me on Instagram at MiffGalloway. Now, go ahead and make those dreams a reality, because actually,